Welcome, everybody, to this week's Thoughtful Thursday, the ongoing continuing education in health and wellness here at Raw Revelations. My name is Coach Joe. I love the idea of being on today's topic because I think this is one of the most pervasive issues that our people are facing at this particular juncture. Um, Scary statistics that are surrounding everything that's happening in this is currently speaking, we're at 1 in 2 people are diabetic. Um, they're expecting by 2025 or 2030, 1 in 1. So that's how they project this to go. Again, we'll go through a lot of details and why I think that number is a little flubbed, but it is probably close to being correct when you look at the way that people are eating these days and what the effects are and how our bodies are being responsive to our environment and the overall sugar load. So like I say, there is the second page here, some great questions, definitely ways of starting to understand your environment and why this problem is something that we see so many people having such a struggle with. Again, this week's topic is focusing on the idea of the diabetic dilemma. The reason I say that is because it's actually one of those rock and a hard place sort of problems. You can't stop eating, so therefore you're going to be exposed to sugars. But the solution system that's presented as the only solution system in terms of pharmaceutical medicine regulation is not a healthy platform. It doesn't provide health solutions, and it definitely doesn't improve health and create wellness in that sort of paradigm. So it's tough because a lot of people are struggling. They're looking for answers. They want solutions. They want to find ways of getting their body back into good health. So there is a little bit of a problem here overall that people are really trying to get back into a good stage, a good step into what's the next step for me. What is it that I can start doing today? How can I find my own solutions, and what can I do to make them stick to where I actually have control of this problem and I don't see myself consistently slipping up and down on this process. So we will begin tonight, like we do every week, with our conscious breathing exercise in order to allow for some breaths of fresh air to come in. It's actually kind of a nice day out. It's been relatively brisk these last few days with this Arctic little blast that's coming in. So we'll just take those few moments to breathe deeply. And for anybody who's catching this, what we do is we actually take 7 seconds to breathe in, a very long inhalation, getting our lungs full of good air. And we take 8 seconds of actually blowing that air out through our mouth in order to actually push all the air all the way down until we breathe right back in. We do that twice, and we just give ourselves 1 minute of just relaxing. So I'll go ahead and start leading with the counts, and everybody just follow along. So thank you as you go ahead and center yourself. So 7 seconds of breath in, holding for a few seconds, and 8 seconds of breath out, all the way down to the bottoms, and then 7 seconds of breath in, and 8 seconds of breath out. Thank you so much for joining me on that one. Like I say, such a good time to pause. It's what, 5:30? The day is still here. But anybody want to take a stab at why this is such a big problem? Personal opinions. I'd love to hear them. Maybe what you think on your own part. Maybe you're a current person who's actually dealing with this issue. You know somebody who has dealt with this problem to where you've got an idea as to what you think might be the actual reason for the big issue. Yes, go ahead, Sue. Not sticking to a diet. Okay, fantastic.
I think we have too many chemicals in our body, and our bodies stop working the way it should. So we're sort of interrupted with the flow of what nature really does.
Yeah, so toxic overload leading to body dysfunction. I like that. That's a good one. Evelyn?
Prepared foods.
Prepared foods. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of packaged materials.
And also, like if we were still on the farm or in the cave, or whenever we had to hunt and forage and all that, we would be using our bodies more, we would be more athletic.
Right, right, right. Keeping in good motion. Yeah, okay. So that's some nice little pieces.
Plus, we don't know all the sugars that are out there. Even reading the label, people not paying attention, the quantity of the sugars that are in those processed foods, even in the ones that they're not suspecting.
Correct. Very true. Yeah, the hidden sugars, the spots where you wouldn't imagine what's kind of creeping up inside a package that you wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to have a baked potato. That must be healthy. When really, in about 4 to 5 hours, it's just a sugar overload. So I agree with that. And again, a lot of it's just not even labeled, or if it's labeled, it's told that alternative or fake sugars is better. Go ahead.
I kind of think that just over a lot of years, diets have changed, trends have changed. There's not one person that stays home every day and cooks a meal from
Real food.
that doesn't come from the center of the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of powerful entities that have a lot at stake,
Mm-hmm.
keeping us shopping in the center of the
Yeah.
market. And not that it's an inescapable evil empire, but we've just gotten away from really close to
What's good for us. Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true. Um,
I don't want to be one of those one and one.
one and ones, exactly.
I know. I hate to say this because I thought I'd always be a career woman. And I taught in school 11 years and all that. But when women started working, and then we needed prepared food more because we come home,
Uh,
the easy stuff.
that's exactly right. That changed everything. Leave It to Beaver was left at home, and all he ate was potato chips. That's what happened. So I definitely feel that society moves and trends change, and it's just unique, I think, as well too, because one of the things I think that leads to most of this, along the lines of what Phil was saying, there's just a lot of dishonesty. The idea that we were kind of told low calorie, low sugar, low fat, this is healthy. You're gaining weight because you're eating foods that aren't good for you. Stop eating eggs, stop eating butter, stop eating beef, stop eating foods that have been, supporting us for a long time. Um, and we see breakdowns in our body that a lot of times the finger is pointed in that direction when it's more of a toxin issue or the organ starts to fail, and the solution actually creates more organ failure. That's one of those great pieces to understand about this dilemma, is that very often the sort of characteristics of what we're getting ourselves into is this roller coaster. We are on this sort of crash and burn, up and down, swing and binge, material of living on sugars, which is not a functional food source. And everybody still has this. And I don't know how. I know that I read papers that began talking about it in the early 70s, to where sugars became synonymous with energy, and that our body needed sugar to be energized. And this relationship is actually very not true. It's a very cheap form of energy, and your body will use it that way. But when it comes to the breaking down of the process, the system, our system, is much more designed for fats, oils, and proteins. Really, grain and carbohydrate structures create just as much distress as what we see inside just eating true sugars. Um, on your second sheet, it talks about the idea of three natural sugar types that are found surrounding us. Anybody have any guesses as to what those three types of sugars are? Yep, yep. So fructose, there you go. Mike, you had mentioned the idea of honey and stevia. Those are specific ones. And again, I like that you're talking about the classification. So we all understand fructose, fruit sugars. So these are materials that are typically found in a disaccharide compound. So you have two saccharide molecules. A single saccharide is more of what people understand. That's where they do glucose testing, meaning blood sugar. We have broken down sugar in the blood. We call that just straight glucose. And then you have all of your oligosaccharides, the actual long chain sugars, the ones that are more wrapped up into carbohydrate structures and more into starches and material like that. To where we can see that there's not just that one or two saccharide molecules shoved together, but now you're getting chains of 5 or 6 or 10, and it's the digestive process that actually eventually converts those all down to simple sugars, one or two. So oligosaccharides are a lot of times the hidden ones, where you wouldn't think a bowl of rice is technically a bowl of sugar. It's just taking a little bit longer for your body to break it down and to turn it into that, so you don't feel it immediately a lot of times, but it's definitely having a process that's going on in our body, and your body is designed to do that digestion. Yes, go ahead, Kay. No, not at all. Proteins actually break down to amino acids. Amino acids break down to amine groups and different BCAAs, different chain molecules for the actual amino structures. Fats break down into lipid chains, and lipid chains there is no sugar. So when it comes to sugar detoxing, to where some people are trying to go through that right now, that I know of, the idea is you need to center that diet back onto proteins and oils, because there's no chance for their body to add additional sugars to the bloodstream. It's very tough to live on that once your body's been programmed for so long living on sugar systems. But look at the difference between a lion and a hummingbird. Hummingbird we see as actually being a very high nectar or sugar liquid eating material. So that's its we think that that's its preferred material. It's actually not true. All hummingbirds are insectivores, and they actually eat small bugs and insects and everything as they're moving around, but it's harder to get those. When they can stop off and take in a lot of sugar real quick, it actually gives them energy to move and go and find those other meal sources, versus that standard sort of lion material. One large zebra, sit down and lay out in the sun for a couple weeks. Life is good. Um, so you can kind of understand our body does both. That's why we're called omnivores. Plants, all plants, what they do with sunlight and water is make sugar. So when we are looking at plant sources for food, those natural abilities for us to add sugars back into the body, then this actually is one of those where most plants eventually convert down to a sugar, if your body can digest them at all. So that's where it's tough, because most of us look at fiber when it comes from like salads and things of that nature, chia seeds, those types of material. Those are indigestible by your body, so there's no sugar production, but it's the carbohydrate fraction that's contained with it that you're still getting some sugar additions to the body. So it's very tough when somebody who's on supposedly a low sugar diet but still eating fresh fruits and vegetables, they're actually still loading the body with a lot of sugar. And you hope the body can break it down, but if you're already in diabetic distress, this creates this overall condition. Like I say, this roller coaster is this up and down swing. Your body's responsive. You take in sugars, insulin's supposed to come up. It actually goes over and starts digesting those sugars out of the bloodstream. Once your glucose to glycogen becomes a certain ratio, then your body balances and it'll shut insulin off and it'll get you to where your body's working at this. Look at these two concepts as glucose is the molecule of active digestion and your body getting energy from sugars. Glycogen's the storage molecule, to where you'll actually tuck it away into parts of the body and leave it for later whenever you might need additional energy coming back into the system. Your insulin is what breaks and converts glycogen into glucose and back and forth. When there's no insulin in the bloodstream, you're storing glucose as glycogen, and when you need energy, your body's taking glycogen and actually converting it over to glucose. This is why it's very misfortunate that we actually have a testing system to where you prick your finger, drop your blood onto a reader, and it gives you a glucose value. That's the active moving around the bloodstream sugar levels. That's not saying what your body has stored and the endless and sometimes limitless supply of additional sugars even if you haven't taken a bite of any sugar at all in the body for days. There's still sugar storage that's in the system. It's the way our body utilizes that very fast burn, quick energy system. Um, and that's why it's so tough with this particular problem, because our bodies naturally work in a sugar system, and it's when it gets abused and these organs aren't producing what they need to break things down, like the pancreas, like the stomach, like the liver. We're definitely falling into a pattern of where can I start to find the best solutions for myself. So it's definitely a patterning system that I would like for people to understand. There is hope to get off the roller coaster. You can stop the craving structures. You can finally get your life back to where you're not just feeling the crash and burn every single day, all day long of I wake up, I have a meal, I get to about 10 o'clock, I crash down, I eat something really quickly, grab whatever I can, fast foods, processed materials, spike back up again till lunchtime, crash at 1 or 2, and this process just continuously keeps us in this cycle. Now, we can keep this up for a long time. Most people's bodies can do a really good job at trying to balance this as best as possible. You eventually get to a point that's what's called insulin resistiveness, though. And that's where your pancreas is actually producing so much insulin into the bloodstream, and glucose is so ever present because we never take time off from eating, that our body just has such a saturation of insulin that your cells are no longer receptive to the actual breakdown of insulin's molecules for creating glycogen to glucose interactions. So once you get to this stage, there's really no quote unquote help for a person who's suffering from this, because the body's done all it can and now the system's overloaded. So it's the same idea of you trying to drive a car when there's motor oil in the gas tank. Everything's gummed up. There's nothing about it that's actually working properly. And the more fuel you'll throw in, you can't get the car to run any better. It'll sputter. It'll not do its job. It'll keep trying to get itself functional, but it just will never do that high level, high revving efficiency like it should. Unless, and this is one of those best solutions, you finally flush the system out, clean everything, and get it to where you're finally going back to letting your system know how to respond. Because when you eat food, insulin comes up, glucose goes back down, insulin shuts off, you eat again, glucose comes up, and that process is how it's supposed to work. But if your glucose is always sky high and your insulin's producing as much as it possibly can, then there's no relationship or interaction that's occurring that's considered healthy here. So again, sugars that we find in nature, our body has digestive enzymes to break them down. Amylase is a compound that we produce inside our mouth as well inside of our spleen. Amylase does a great job at beginning glucose breakdown. So that's definitely one of those. But all the other functions in the actual pancreas is the sensing organ for presence or non-presence in the blood of high sugar levels. The reason I say that that 1 in 2 value is a little bit of a flub factor is because we have a number that's out there that at 99 nanograms per mole of blood system, you actually are considered healthy. At 100, you're diabetic. That's the way that this system operates. And that's why it's not truthful when they say that 1 in 2 people are diabetic, because really, most people's systems will fluctuate up when they eat a cookie, come back down. They'll eat, a salad, it'll come up a little bit, it'll go back down. And that response system, they're not staying in the 150, 170, 200, getting up to the thousands every single day, all day long. That's a diabetic. So the interesting part about overdiagnosis here is that everyone's labeled as one because you eat food. And that's not fair, because your human body is trying to figure it out, even if it's sluggish, if it's slow, and you have food in the morning and your blood sugar goes up to 150, but by the end of the day it comes back down to 110, 125. That's, again, your body's showing that it can break glucose down. It's just not doing it very effectively. So this is definitely a process that I would like for people to discover, is that you can get a hold of this naturally. You can find solutions in food. Food might be the problem at first, but food can be the solution as well too, when you learn how to eat different styles and different ways of getting the body back into function. Yes, go ahead, Val.
You were talking about rice turning into sugar. What about
Correct.
really? What about wild rice? What about brown rice?
Yes and yes. Wild rice, not so much because of the thick hull and the actual heavy fibrous outer coating that's still the part of the wild rice structure. Brown rice is really just a thin paper covering over top of white rice. There's really no difference there. So both of those still are heavy carbohydrate load, and that's where when we see carbs, really we should say to our in our heads soon to be sugars. Starch is a little later; it'll be sugar. So when we see how an actual nutrition panel is written out, they might tell you there's only 9 or 10 grams of sugar in this item, but then there's 30 grams of carb. Well, that means you've actually, on average, got anywhere between 5 to 10 extra molecules of sugar in those particular carbohydrates that will become sugar. So you're looking at 9 grams of actual sugar and probably something close to 180 to 200 or 300 grams of soon to be sugar. So that's where we get kind of tripped up in this process. Go ahead.
I'm reading a book. It's called "You Have the Guts to Be Beautiful." And this is a doctor
That's a fun one.
who's claiming that our bodies are showing all the toxins,
Mm-hmm.
all those brown spots we see.
Oh yeah.
That's really poop that's in your
Stuck
blood
inside the.
that's going
Mm-hmm.
to your skin.
Yep.
So she is saying to eat only vegetables. Well, that's all sugar, from what you're saying.
Fiber and carbohydrate. Yes. So.
And she's saying just eat vegetables and liver flush.
Yes, liver flushing, fantastic. With the concept, again, of just eat vegetables, not really talking about dietary plans and patterning today, but the idea is it can create other issues. A lot of times, the reason people love to flock towards vegetarianism or juice cleansing or doing just salads or whatever as a diet is because it's such a radical change from what they were eating before. They lose weight, they feel a little bit better, they get more energy, everything works out at first. Most people's body types are still omnivorous. They need both pieces, and there's health and benefits in both sides. So when someone says vegetables only, it's a great start for a lot of people, and it's a great healthy way of getting into thinking about your foods. Most people, again, I would say, take probably 25 to 30% of the population can do very well on a vegetarian-based diet. 20 to 30% are going to do very well on a more carnivorous paleo structure diet. And then you have the ones that are in the middle, and those, then you get that sliver section of people who, I mean, there's people who only eat fruit. That's it. So it's unique because all sugar. Yes. Yes, they're totally not type A like crazy people. No. Oh no, he's joking.
There's some really big personalities on the internet, and they're
Yes.
usually fruitarians.
Yeah, yeah, the 100 bananas people, and yeah, no, very, very unique concept. But that's where it'll start helping at first a lot of times, and it's a great way to change the body. But when it comes to the eventuality of it, is there's still a modification that's going to have to happen. And even though it's a great start, it is true. What's inside the gut is coming out into the skin. And if you aren't processing it properly and your body's not working effectively, that's where we are seeing our beauty fail and trying to cover it up or Botox it out or do anything of that nature. We're not paying attention to the underlying internal issues that are actually happening for the human body.
Just one note about the fruit thing. I heard that it's like seasonal. Like if it's growing where you live,
Correct.
if like you live in a tropical area and you're more prone to get like more sun and you're grounded more often and you're living more of a natural life,
Uh-huh.
and you're not around EMF and city living, then your body can maybe tolerate the fruit a lot better.
Correct.
So it could be where you're living.
Very true.
And
Very
your,
true.
And your body type.
It's tough.
Other variables
It's
that
a
would work for somebody, but maybe not others.
Oh, yes, that's very true. Higher latitudes, that's where we see, again, more oil dominant lifestyles. Look at Viking, Eskimo, most of the actual native cultures that are, they're eating all fish, all whale blubber, all seal blubber, all meats all the time. Versus, again, tropical diet, you can, gorge on fruit every day, fresh picked from a tree because it's just naturally growing there. So there is a lot of that environmental relationship as well, too. So I really want to get into, since we've kind of broken down a couple of these good articles about hidden sugars, and yeah, you can't really trust the fact that you're sitting down. Again, the reason carrots are sweet is because they have on average 20 to 35 grams of sugar per half cup. Like they're heavily sugar laden. And again, natural sugars are better than it would be for artificial. But it is something where we want to take into good consideration how our body's responding.
Say
And
artificial, commercially produced.
correct. So that's where what we see is there are in nature these fantastic sugars. And then what we have discovered, or what we have now in our society, is these sugars produced in the lab. And that's where we've really taken things to the point to where we have 1 and 2 are being said as being diabetic. The main issue in this is that we don't have an enzyme in our body to break down aspartame or sucralose or sorbitol or Splenda. There's no enzyme that we've created inside our biological structure that helps us break down these particulates. We actually have the enzymes to break down honey. We have the enzymes to break down fruit sugars, fructose. And we have all of the processes inside the Krebs cycle and our ATP production in order to break down glucose to get the energy out of it. But it's one of those where as soon as you start seeing chemically produced synthetic materials, then all of a sudden now you have this big issue because the pancreas is in there sensing the blood as it's traveling through the body in order to really find that when the glucose level rises, it starts producing the insulin. But if technically there's no digestion of what's now coming in as fake sugars and the blood's registering produce more insulin, and it never really breaks down, that's the trick. So when the dietary sort of recommendations on low sugar, low calorie, low all of these sort of products became popular as the diet world began to be the main way of trying to combat obesity, they never went back to foundation nutrition and understanding how the body naturally breaks things down. They just started putting more chemical sugars inside the system. And the pancreas doesn't see the difference. It doesn't understand that, oh, wait a minute, that's actually 15 grams of aspartame instead of 5 grams of honey. It doesn't understand those sort of relationships. It just sees it as sugar and it does its job as effectively as it possibly can. So when we get these laboratory produced sugars, not only are there all the other side issues that go along with the chemical sort of attitude, the toxins like we talk about, but it's just the fact that the body is doing what it naturally knows how to do and it gets caught up into an interesting pattern.
So you don't have the enzymes to break down the artificial sugar.
Correct.
Is that giving you and they are sugar?
They are a style of sugar, yep.
Style of sugar. Is that giving when you do prick your finger, or does that end up giving your body a
false positive?
False positive.
Mm-hmm. And it actually will start allowing them to give you a diagnosis that creates a pharmaceutical need for medicine. And that's one of those because your blood sugar levels are technically never coming down to normal or natural layers, but it's because the digestion system is not able to break things apart. So you're on the diabetic friendly diet and your sugar levels keep increasing. Well, that just means more pharmaceuticals. That's the only system that we have in that world for those options in terms of combating this. And the issue that we see is the body tries to store all of the actual undigestible material anywhere it can possibly shove it. So that means the joints. So we start seeing arthritic pain. We start seeing it being put into different organelles, and that's something where we see a lot of issues where you start getting thyroid issues, you start getting digestive issues in the liver because these gummy materials are never being broken down. Your body doesn't have a way of cleaning them out. So when you're talking about liver flushing for diabetic health, you're exactly right, because when you can clear that filtration organ out, then you finally see that the body can start to deal with more load or more volume because the filter is actually working better. So it's kind of like wringing the sponge and then sticking it back into sop up more of the actual spill or mess, and then you wring it out again. So if you can clean that liver and actually get it to be processing better, then you start seeing the overall digestion of sugars improve. So that becomes a definite piece in that healing process for a lot of people. So that's one of those where, again, know your alternative sugar sources. Know what's out there inside the packaging foods because they love to use very weird names in order to make it sound less harmful. Like they've started relabeling aspartame, which everybody has understood at least relatively well that it's causing problems in all of the diet sodas and things of that nature. So now they call it amino sweet. Now it's for a wonderful like brand. It's called amino sweet now. So now all of a sudden, hey, you've got amino sweet in your product. It's low sugar, low calorie, wonderful for you. Gonna essentially cause the same problems, and people just don't see that. Splenda became sorbitol. They just changed the names to get rid of the branding issues that were happening to the body and wanting to get people to not be able to check those labels out. When it says again zero sugars in an item that you think should technically have some, there's probably a good indication they're using alternative sweeteners, and it's something to stay away from. So that's a big piece in this. And again, those hidden sugar structures are something that I deal with very routinely with people just get tripped up. They'd have never known that an actual pureed parsnip, on underneath of a steak for a dinner would actually be creating a big diabetic issue and create that. And so they eat it. They think it's a vegetable. It's got to be good for me. And yet the overall load on the body is still extremely high. So when it comes to trying to get your body through the sugar detox and get out of that realm of living solely on glucose, then your body can start to get tripped up by those things, and it makes for a scary situation when you're technically dealing with really high numbers and you start to get diabetic, induced migraines, headaches, muscle aches, and have the whole system just not doing well. And here you're struggling to be healthy, eating fresh vegetables, nice fruits and all of this, but your body's still just not capable of really helping you break it down. Um, so let me get into a couple of the really amazing sort of natural and healthy ways to start making your body much more functional towards glucose regulation. One of the most amazing ones that I think is the critical first start, actually not on your list because I wanted everyone to write this down and know that there's a connection here. Magnesium is the base mineral for digestion of glucose. Magnesium is the most critical piece in healing a body who's actually having trouble with diabetic issues. So start there first. Number one. Um, you have topical magnesium. You have high rich magnesium containing foods like cacao, pepitas, lots of nuts, seeds. Um, those are great abilities. I caution people though on the idea of just using liquid or tabletized or magnesium in any form through the digestive system. The main reason being is that it typically ends up working more like a laxative instead of actually being something your body can absorb into its cells and into the tissue. So the body's just not as efficient as what we think it is towards busting magnesium away from compounds and getting that one isolate molecule to be able to absorb it into the bloodstream and use it other places, as what we find that the skin does this job so efficiently. So, and the difference here is enormous. So through the digestive system, we find that the absorption rate's about 15%. And that's if you have really good digestion, and it's a really good quality magnesium, and it's very absorbable and bioavailable in the compounds that you're taking it in. Through the skin, you get about 75% to 85%. So it's such a difference in terms of getting your body's base magnesium levels up to start seeing better glucose digestion. Um, so when we talk like the five essentials, that's just such a key piece in this, and it is the beginning building block for having any success or luck on creating an overall better glucose digestion profile. But I want to talk about the more specific ones that have just laser in on diabetic balance. B1, thiamine, is the B vitamin that actually is responsible for glucose digestion. So this is the molecule that actually needs to be in higher dosing and higher functioning inside our bodies. When you're a type 1 diabetic, meaning you never had the beta glucan cells inside your appendix or your pancreas to produce insulin, and you're kind of stuck in the injectable world, you should still be taking B1 because it will assist the body in a natural process, in a natural order for helping you be better at balancing your own blood sugars. So even though you don't have the compound and you're taking it from an extra source, there's still benefits in both magnesium and B1 for giving that to a person even with type 1 diabetes. We have B vitamins in everything from liquids, again, B vitamins in a lot of the superfoods to where you can start getting good concentrations of that. There's a lot of people out there who make glucose support pills that actually are going to focus on things like B1. Um, But with thiamine concentrations increasing, you should start to see better regulation and dropping in the actual glucose levels of testing. B6 is one of those to where we actually get a little bit of an interesting and more unique and dynamic breakdown and effect as well too. So, peroxidine is really one of these that actually goes in and assists the breakdown of carbohydrates. So if you're a person who's eating a very carbohydrate rich diet, you should definitively be adding B6 to every meal in order to assist the process of breakdown. So the problem with B vitamins, both B1 and B6, is that you can't really store them. They're water soluble, so your body flushes them out very quickly. So they need to go with your actual meals in order for them to be used at the time that you're trying to start that digestive process. So again, B complexes that contain a high dose of B6 really starts to allow for these different acid compounds to be involved in the digestive process, and it's mainly to get some of those oligosaccharides that are actually the long chain material and allow the body to start getting rid of those. So instead of storing them into the body, then we can actually see the overall process of getting those out. And this is one where we don't see as much benefit to type 1, but we definitely see a lot of benefit to type 2. So if you're a person who has progressively become insulin resistant and developed a diabetic issue, then we really want to see this become a new stage, a new step. And again, even if you're just eating something that's a slightly starchy meal, but definitely with carbohydrates, we really want that to be the case. Uh, that's in the complex there as well too, and you can find that even just getting B6 capsules by themselves and having that be a step in the right direction. Again, one of the things that I work with people so frequently and routinely, and it comes to healing on the alternative realm, the idea is you're trying something out for a few weeks to see how it really affects the body, and then making a judgment call. If you add a bunch of B6, don't really see a change, maybe you have adequate B vitamin levels and you don't need to be increasing B6, and it could be one of these other items that actually is your key to kind of unlocking your overall diabetic issues. Vitamin C being one of the more critical ones that a lot of people are missing out on. And I say this in a way of saying that making it a natural vitamin C instead of a synthetic ascorbic acid is actually so much more important as well too in this process. We just don't again have the relationship of understanding that when you see ascorbic acid listed on the actual nutritional label and it says that it actually has vitamin C in it, and that's what it calls it, those two compounds aren't really interchangeable. They are labeled as such, but it is usually a synthetic source versus a natural system. This is where a lot of people can see benefits to their diabetic levels if they start eating a lot of tart cherries, start taking in a lot of pomegranate, and things that have a really good vitamin C source. Our favorite is camu camu berry. So camu camu is just one of the most intense and very high levels of vitamin C that we've been able to find, to where even just a quarter of a teaspoon per day gives you a much higher concentration of that vitamin C molecule, and all the other benefits of being a berry that has a lot of other good antioxidants and great functions for the body as well too. So vitamin C, very, very critical for the overall breakdown and for the release of compounds from the liver that actually assist in the enzyme production, and that begins that process of really helping start to tear apart the actual sugar materials as well too. And as much as we don't really give it too much credit for what it does, but vitamin E is another one that actually does a fantastic job because it's really an assisting molecule for protection inside cells to not become insulin resistant. So it actually starts activating the exchange in the information system for the body to actually see those molecules starting to represent, because it's really a unique relationship that we have as glucose sits on the outside of a molecule and a cell that's wishing it could have some energy. It needs to absorb in the compounds out of that glucose to break it apart inside the cell to make ATP. So if those those intermittent relationships and those signals aren't being effectively created, then that's where we see the breakdown, and that insulin resistance problem becomes the bigger issue for a lot of people. So vitamin E has that very wonderful secondary source of making it to where now communication between the cells starts having a great effect. So I really wanted to get into some of the sort of hard hitting but very truthful ways of understanding that glucose damage, diabetic issues. We have all heard stories. People lose feet, they lose legs, um, they have issues in terms of organelles shutting down because their insulin level is so high. Their eyes are going and actually having technically glucose plaque building up on the inside of the retinal walls to where you can lose your sight, diabetic blindness. That means the actual glucose layers or glucose levels in the blood are so high that there's no way of bringing them back down. And again, insulin resistance is set in. You're taking injectable insulin and it's not really working. It's not actually bringing levels down. I know a lot of stories out there that I've heard of kind of stubborn and obstinate people towards their health that literally take the pill, eat whatever they feel like they can, and are ending up with sugar values that are in the thousands. I mean, and they just never see it come back down. So it's definitely one of these where most people are struggling, and you've got to find that first step for yourself to begin the healing process. But the idea of feeling like you can finally start using natural foods to get control might be your best foot forward there. Again, joint damage is one of those we see a lot because of it's a great storage location for excess glucose and glycogen, and the actual tendon tissues. If you are having a high glucose value all the time, will start to develop that same plaque of the actual glucose, and it'll start to harden all of the tendons and actually, again, even create hardening in arteries and all the flexible tissues that need to be moving inside the body. So when you're experiencing this, increased blood sugar volume, it's not just the fact that your sugar's high. It's the fact that everything in your body is trying to find ways of getting that level down, and it creates those other damage points. And that's neuropathies, exactly. And that's what we're talking about right here next. Nerves will literally shut down and turn off their sensing capabilities when that plaque of that glucose gets so thick that they just can't transmit the electron information for the sodium potassium pump. So when we see people who suffer from things like fibromyalgia or restless leg syndrome, not only is there the connection of other toxicities probably present in the body, but a lot of times it's your own insulin that your body's producing that's actually creating this oversensitization and creating a painful system in the actual nervous function. And neuropathy, again, our mineral profile is usually so far off skew for all the different compounds that we're needing to get in the body to keep good nerve health. But when high levels of insulin are coming in here, and that's one of those great things that I'd love to stop and just make a really big point. Most people, diabetic or not, very rarely get their actual insulin values checked. The insulin's a hormone. It's not actually tested by a glucose meter. Glucose is the byproduct of having functional or non-functional glucose. Very rarely. And that's where it's unique, because a lot of times, even with the pharmaceutical system, they'll give you the pill or the injection that actually adds insulin to your system and never check your beginning or end values of insulin. And that's such a huge mistake towards the idea of healing. Again, the idea is I've balanced your blood sugar with this pill, you must be healthy now. Well, that's a symptom, it's a side effect of proper insulin values, not knowing whether or not the glucose goes up or down. Eat a piece of cookie, eat a piece of celery, it doesn't really matter, there's going to be glucose change. So we have to see that there's a responsive nature to this process. And insulin is so critical to actually get that hormone tested. And it will start to tell you, because most people who are diabetic will find that they're also very high insulin producing people. And when the doctor kind of sits down and thinks about that, that shouldn't be the case. Too much insulin should mean all your glucose gets broken down. But that relationship is something that you've got to stress on your own for being an advocate for your own health, that in this process we really want to see the body going back to keeping those nerves in good health and condition. Tell them you'd like to test your serum insulin values.
Serum insulin levels.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hormone, but my looked at me and said, huh?
Yeah.
She says, what would you do even if you knew? And
That's
it was,
right.
it was like, shh, she never heard it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And again, that's the process you're messing with. Is then it doesn't make sense to me that you would give somebody something that you know is going to change a certain value in the blood without ever knowing that value in the blood, when it's just as easy as testing for anything else. Um, so we definitely need to get into this understanding. Um, Protein glycation inside your organelles is what creates liver dysfunction, cirrhosis. Alcoholics, when they're actually drinking on a routine basis, what they're doing is they're technically over sugaring their liver. Their liver becomes hard, it becomes inflamed, it actually stops filtering, everything gets gummed up and plugged, and it starts to swell because that process, that's protein glycation of the actual liver. This happens in the pancreas itself, to where we see, again, type 2 diabetics. The body is literally producing insulin all day long. The glucose levels are never coming down, and the pancreas literally just solidifies and can't produce its insulin levels anymore. We see this in the eyes, we see this in joints, but it is one of those where certain organs are much more proficient to having this problem occur because they're filtering organs. So kidney issues, liver issues, thyroid issues, they are definitely subject to a lot of this. And protein glycation actually occurs any time that your glucose levels jump above 135. The difference is if you have proper functioning insulin and your body's digesting your glucose, it drops back down below. But anytime your blood sugar level raises above 135, protein glycation is occurring somewhere in the body. So this is where one of the biggest misconceptions in the recent history is the idea of healthy whole grains for heart health. And yet grains just convert back to the carbohydrates that they are. They get broken down to the sugars. And here you have a slightly diabetic individual with high blood pressure and chronic heart disease, and you've literally created that time bomb process. I imagine, the great way of thinking that it's the person who's carrying the gunpowder, and they're dumping it on the ground as they're like walking away from the big explosions and not realizing it's already on fire. And it's just, it's coming right towards you. You literally have created a condition. So when it comes to a lot of the grains, we really do need to watch for what your body is responsive to. And when I start working with individuals on a routine basis when it comes to diabetic balance, it is literally eat one food type for a day or two and test your glucose morning, noon, and night to see how your body really responds to that particular food. And so you can actually get a good understanding of like, well, wait a minute, I might not do such a dramatic increase from mashed potatoes as compared to French fries. Truthfully, even the cooking process changes the material to where your body responds very differently. Um, but that's where you can start to chart and actually get an understanding of, wait a minute, if I actually have a lean piece of meat, a little bit of broccoli, and a little side of wild rice instead, my glucose values only increase 10 to 20 points versus the idea of, you know, some sort of chicken sandwich with the bread on there on the side, a really heavy mashed potato, and then a nice, saucy sort of, instant macaroni and cheese or something like that. All of a sudden you see your glucose values go up 100 points. And that's where you say, okay, well, now I know this category of food, no go. This category of food, I can be in better balance and better control. So it's funny because when we talk about the insulin and glucose testing, I see that all the time. I get people who literally are just deadpan, and they are diabetic specialists who work with people on diabetes, and yet they don't. I don't know if it's that they've forgotten how important insulin is to the process, or that they just don't understand of its role and fraction. Because as it is a hormone, it does so many other functions than just glucose regulation. And when we dumb that hormone down to just that one function, we don't realize all the other processes in the body that are actually having an issue and misfiring. And this is one of those where there is a little bit of a connection towards insulin resistiveness, overproduction of insulin, and cancer rates. We do see that. So we know that there's a correlation that could be in the whole process of once you're not utilizing your insulin effectively, then we could see other issues occurring here. I definitely, like I say, love that this lecture focuses on the idea that in the pharmaceutical system, it is very rare that a person taking a sugar pill, um, particular name, I'll not mention it today, but the idea is that they never get off that train. It seems to be a one-way track. And it kind of goes down a dead end process because you almost are guaranteed that if you're using the pill to start regulating glucose today, eventually that's not going to work. You've got to go to injections. Eventually that doesn't work and you've got to go to the actual PIC line or whatever it is that they do with the automatic insulin sensing injection material. And it'd be very different to me if I was seeing people who were taking the pharmaceutical solution and getting better to where they, after 2 or 3 months of balancing their body, felt like there was actually a change and their overall health improved to where they didn't need to take it anymore. I've never heard of that occurring. I've known a lot of people who get fed up and they stop taking it, and without dietary changes, behavioral changes, and getting their body into an overall better platform for being healthy, we just see that end up being a dead end. And again, progressive issues that happen. Like I say, the fact that you actually would lose an appendage because of your ice cream addiction, or you're loving Diet Coke so much that you think there can't be anything wrong with it. It's just an interesting process for people to go through to get out of this cycle. And I know it's a struggle. I've been working with people for the last 3 or 4 years now, and compared to all other forms of addictive material, the sugar addiction is one of the hardest to crack. It's just such a primal urge, and it's everywhere around you. It's
Is, it,
such
is there that much difference between, let's say, the Dr. Pepper and the Diet Dr. Pepper and the effect on the body?
Yes. I mean, I would say that I mean, most of them use fake sugars anyways for the regular or the diet. But the issue is the indigestibility of compounds like aspartame, the breakdown to formaldehyde, the actual chemical toxicity that goes into production of just even the high levels of phosphoric acids and things of that nature, also destroying the body at the same time. So it's that combination effect that really makes it so life affecting, versus a standard traditional like cane sugar and carbonated water soda, which is a much more natural soda. Your body actually does a much better job. Everybody out there probably sees the tall glass bottle Coke and Sprites and everything still in the grocery store. They are made, in Mexico, and they actually use regular sugar, and the body is okay with a little bit of regular sugar. You still have to watch this. I don't want someone going out and drinking 6 a day, but the idea is if you're going to get yourself working on removing, especially a more sugar soda addiction, then that could be a great first step. You still get to have your soda. It's not containing the heavy chemical sugars. Your body can start to see a little bit better balance.
One other question. I overheard you weeks ago
Uh huh.
talking about guava.
Agave, yes. Um, Agave, for the native people, southwestern United States, they have the concept that it should only ever be fermented. You should never be eating raw agave. Again, what we're seeing is that the breakdown in the body, unlike a thing like maple syrup or the birch xylitol, some of these other plant-based sugar byproducts, agave does something interesting to the liver. It doesn't break down as effectively. So there's just something in it that fermentation seems to be the only way that I would recommend it. So if you love agave, wait till it turns into tequila and enjoy it that way, because that seems to be like much more fun. But the idea is it's not as wonderful as a replacement sugar. It's just a really big cash crop for Mexico and this area here, southwestern United States. So with our wonderful political system, we started exchanging and bringing that into the country. It's not the same though as if you're taking something like xylitol or stevia as another alternative replacement for sugar. So I don't recommend it very much. Actually, maple syrup is better than agave or any of those. We work with like the sunroot Jerusalem artichoke. That nectar is actually a very high quality one and easy for the body to break down. So just a much better option than straight agave. So as we're finishing and rounding out today's class and going towards the end, I would love for someone to give me their estimates, and I always like hearing and I don't know if you're going to remember, for the total amount of tons of sugar produced in 2014. Just throw out numbers. Okay, Mike, you're next to your computer and you totally looked that up, didn't you?
2 million tons.
So Mike got it. Mike got it on the dot. So he's doing really well there. But so 200 tons.
I said 2 million.
2 million tons. Yeah.
Is that for the whole world or one country?
So you said 2 million. Okay. Any other ideas?
I know the country that has the highest sugar consumption in the world.
Uh huh.
You tell me that one.
To tell you that one. So anybody else have a guess?
Just a guess.
Trillions. That's way too high. No, come on. Let me just sugar production.
All sugar.
Global sugar production. Yeah. Cane sugar, beet sugar, all of them. 172.5 million tons. Now, that's pretty crazy because there's 7 billion people, so maybe that's enough to go around, right? But in America, what do you believe the average poundage per year is for our own consumption?
This isn't my number, but I took a guess at 250 pounds a year.
That's what I think.
That's close. It's closer than most people would start off in.
That's how I eat.
It's about 180. So if you think of how much you weigh, and the average person is actually eating close to their body weight in sugar per year. So that's where we're getting this problem. And it is a marketing issue. It is a hidden sort of don't really pay attention to the very large white elephant that we sweep under the rug over here on the sugar issue. And the numbers actually don't get any better when you see, that is the average adult. They're not much better for the average child. So when you look at their body volume and actually being able to take in 100 to 120 pounds per year, that's a definitive issue. That's why we are starting to see this problem really creep up on us. So this, again, this lecture is to really help, I hope, everybody who's watching this, if you're personally suffering from these conditions, if you know somebody who is and they just kind of don't seem like they're getting the right information to get their balance on this struggle, to be able to come in and reference a few of these items, give me an email, send me even call, whatever it might be to get started on a process. I'm almost going to put it out there as a kind of a challenge or at least an opportunity. If I can get 10 to 12 people who actually want to come in and talk about just diabetic control, I'll set up an actual group that will actually just focus on that one. To where in this community, if there's people who are watching this or seeing this and they think they would want to actually do something that's just about diabetic balance, then I would love to have that opportunity if there's a good enough crowd that people that want to get together and open something up and start the discussion, because it is a process for every individual person, and support groups that actually focus on natural solutions is definitely a place where I would love to be. So anybody who would like to email me or send me information for somebody to let me reach out to them and say, hey, listen, I've got a friend of mine. Yes, go ahead.
You want to write me up a little blurb, because I can do a neighbor to neighbor and cover like 500 houses where I live.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I'd love to set something up.
I go to a senior potluck at Maria. I actually asked them if they wanted me to come talk, but I haven't had a response.
Oh yeah.
Every Wednesday at the senior center, third Wednesday of every month.
Yeah.
It's a seniors potluck, and we all just sit around and talk about this and that and this. And we even talked about magnesium one night.
Oh, good.
Really? The doctor sees my mom like this? So does he test her for magnesium levels? Oh no, never.
Yeah.
They all know. Just anyway.
The big thing about magnesium, and just topic in talking about dietary. The, even the people taking the magnesium,
Yeah.
the ones where the doctors are saying you need to take magnesium because of your dietary situation, whether you're diabetic or not, they're not promoting skin absorption.
No.
They're just saying take another pill that's just going to pass through you.
Correct.
You
Correct.
know,
Very true.
That's what I'm trying to convince my mom of right now.
Oh, good.
You know, she said, well, I take magnesium.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
If it's not having an
I'm telling
effect.
you, it's the same thing like with vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do my vitamin D pills, or I do a lot of diet with dairy products.
Right. Right.
But it's not in the format.
Yeah. Exactly.
For the body.
Not the right system.
That's where they don't grasp it. And the doctors don't share that information.
Well, they don't know it.
And they don't
Most
know
of
it.
them don't know
Yeah.
And most people want to believe the doctors. I'm doing this with my husband.
Yeah.
All they care
I
about
know.
is what the doctor says.
Just to finish,
I don't know.
if you write that blurb, I'll take it over there.
Okay. Definitely. Yeah, let me put something, like I say, I'll just put something in an email and we'll just open it up, because I think that would be a fantastic way for people. If I get a few individuals who want to meet routinely and make it a once a month thing, then at least they would get some help and know all of a sudden to recommend for other people, because it's not hard. It's just big steps. And it's one of those where it's just great to get going in that process.
We're cool, but we fight it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like I say. So enjoy the alternative solutions to being able to find blood sugar balance and regulation out there. Mike, I know that I can't really see if you have any questions or anything you'd like to add, then that way the group can actually hear them. Right. Yeah. So what Mike's asking about is the idea of like, can you do a sugar detox cold turkey? Yes, you can. Um, you're not going to like yourself for a little while. Life becomes a little bit interesting to deal with somebody who's finally hitting that last crash of not taking in a heavy load of carbohydrates and a lot of fake or just even natural sugars. But it is one of those to where I'm much more of a gentle giant health coach person. So I don't want somebody to, put themselves through just the idea of doing a sugar detox flat, because it's really hard. Um, Again, it's the same actual nervous brain areas and nervous system receptors as if you were trying to detox from opiates. So if you had a heavy cocaine addiction and you had ever experienced that type of detox, it's about the same. The blood system registers it. It's almost the exact same way, which is why there are a lot of people who are actually pushing to get sugar labeled as a Schedule II drug, and actually saying that high concentrations should be almost the same way regulated as anybody who has a very alcoholic based drink, because of the effects. And I actually did just recently learn that you can get a diabetic DUI. And an officer, when pulling you over, can test your blood sugar. And if you are above a certain value, you will go to jail for operating your vehicle while technically under the influence. And that shows you how affected the body is when it comes to diabetic overload. So be careful of that. Friend of mine literally was pulled over here in Temecula, and he's like, you were, driving kind of aggressively and swerving a couple little bits over here. What, have you been drinking today? No. And he's like, I'm just really upset. I'm kind of angry right now. Well, what's wrong? And he's like, well, I'm just going through the sugar detox. And, he's like, well, oh, so you're a diabetic? Well, yeah, hold on one second. EMT was there within a few minutes and testing him. And luckily his values were low, but he would have been arrested. Had no idea that was something that could have happened to him. even through all of his struggles and everything that was there.
Why would they arrest him versus taking him to the hospital?
Because it's a DUI. It's labeled and listed as a DUI. It's very interesting the fact that that law is there. I just again, some people you can't help it. I mean, you don't know if you're in a state. Yes, Sue.
I've been taking the
Uh-huh.
detoxifier, but nothing's happening.
What do you mean?
Nothing's happening.
What do you mean?
I'm staying off sugar
Good.
for the most part.
For the most part, fantastic.
Process.
Good. Okay.
But nothing's happening.
Well,
She's not seeing bodily.
yes, of course. Again, detoxify is grabbing particulates in the bloodstream, in your organs, and doing things of that nature to pull that out slowly and get rid of those. It's going to take some time for you to see a lower sugar based diet start to have waistline effects or mood effects or anything, because your body usually takes about 20 to 30 days just to get used to the new system, and then about 20 to 30 days for it to actually start changing the way it operates. So don't
I think she's expecting bodily rejection of material
no
to change.
Right. Well, that's why detoxify is so amazing, because you don't go through the flushing that most people would experience if they were doing like a juice cleanse. But that's one of those where it's binding those materials and letting you slowly excrete them out to where it's not so painful. Again, if you were working with me and we just did a straight colon liver flush right immediately, and you would have had a change occur for a few days, and you would have been more. I mean, I think that's one of those interesting things about our population. We love smack you in the face results instead of the idea of, okay, what am I doing this week? Okay, what am I doing? And you just slowly, like Mike was saying there, stepping into a body change. It's best to have a plan. And the idea is now cutting processed sugars. That's great. Then we can start finding ways of boosting metabolism and getting everything start to work better for your body in these next few coming weeks. But getting over that first hump of just reducing the general daily sugar intake was a huge first step. So now we have other things we can start playing with as well too, and start doing more. So, and yeah, if you want to sign up for a liver flush, I'll get it to where you feel something. But it is one of those where I love working with people. Yeah, I love working with people to make it a safe environment for change. That's the most important piece. That they're not just jumping out and maybe just going through their health aisle at their health food store and just buying a box of something that says cleanse on it and just taking it and seeing what happens. Knowing that you go into this with I want to do this function, and how do I split the difference and get there. So when it comes to, like I say, your next steps in these coming weeks, we're really using the detoxify to help bring down the pharmaceutical load, any other additional toxins, and maybe next week then we can start looking at doing just a good body cleanse. Clean out the liver, clean out the colon, the blood, and see how that feels. Because you can work through that process over a month and actually get the body starting to really change. So I mean, it is definitely something where more steps coming.
As far as the detoxifier, how do I know how much I'm supposed to be doing?
Average is anywhere between half a teaspoon to a teaspoon.
Well, you told us to start off on a quarter.
Yeah, yeah.
And she did that for like first week to 10 days.
Oh, good.
And then now she's at a half.
Half, fantastic. And still keep giving it some time to where, but eventually get up to about a teaspoon of detoxify. And it just because if we went up to a tablespoon right at first, you would have felt like you were hit by a train and laying on the floor and flu-like symptoms and Herkmeister, healing crisis, and everything would have just been unbearable. So doing this process is that great way, and we're still working with MSM and magnesium and other things for you as well too. Yep, and the Mucuna and all of those sort of balance. The Mucuna is the one that I would say you probably notice the most change from, if anything, about mood balance. Still very low.
Remember, we actually started it before she started her detox.
Right.
Because she started, what's today, the 8th?
Today's the 9th.
Okay, so she's been in her detox for 9 days.
Okay.
Because we started the first of the month. But I started her on the other, starting smaller
Macunas, yep.
small increments and moving it up.
Yep.
Just getting her prepped.
Oh yeah. So that's one of those where get it up to about a teaspoon. If again you're liking that for nighttime still for relaxation, so we can still see that those benefits that are coming to you from this process for yourself.
She's not getting it necessarily at night, but she's getting it late afternoon.
Late afternoon. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Should I tell you what this recipe is from my liver cleanse? I'm reading this book and then.
Sure. Yeah. What liver cleanse are they promoting?
Well, it's that one, The Other Guts to Be Beautiful.
Uh huh.
But I have to go back and reread it. But the only thing I can remember is you have to use distilled water.
Mm-hmm.
But when you use distilled water, then you have to use like whey protein or something so you get all the balances of it. That pulls a lot out of your system.
Right.
And that's with doing it as an enema.
Okay.
I hate that thought.
Yeah, that's not fun.
And then whey is sugar.
Yeah, there's lactose.
It's a lactose.
Yeah, and I'm wondering because I was supposed to be told I was lactose intolerant.
Yeah, it's most people are not. It's the compounds that come in with the lactose that they're intolerant of, not the lactose itself. That's what most people have an issue with. That's the fact that conventional dairy is just full of pesticides, fertilizers, hormones, radiation, everything, and it has nothing to do with the lactose itself. But that's one of those where industrial system blames the compound that's naturally there instead of thinking that for some reason the synthetic compound could do anything to you that's negative.
This was way back in the early 70s when I did that.
Oh, okay.
Well, it probably was
Still
bad
was
then.
issue. Yeah, lots of issues. Lots of issues. All right. Thank you so much for everybody who's come out this evening to join us on this particular talk. I hope you got some pieces out of this that you can go home and start thinking about your own sugar balance and how to get your body starting to work much more effectively. But definitely use this as a great platform, and always tell people they can come and check these videos recorded if they'd like to follow up for themselves and see what we had to say. And if there's any information that I can help give them, feel free. Send me an email. Give us a call over here at Raw Revelations.
What's your email?
My email address is joseph@rrsuperfoods.com. So Raw Revelations, like I say, everything here tonight, 10% off for joining us this evening. If there's anything we can do, Mike and I will be here for a little bit afterwards, extra questions or anything. But thank you so much for joining for this evening. I hope you guys have a great, great night. Thank you. All right, Mike. We'll talk to you later. I'll set something up with you via